Well, hello. Hal here, and I have some friends with me. I have Lawerence and Tracy Mixon. And the purpose of this video is I have just decided I'd like to gather together some parents that I really respect, who I consider good parents, who have done a really good job at raising their kids as far as my perspective. Lawerence and Tracy go to my church, and they have 8 children. And I don't know all their children because some of them are grown. I think your oldest is what?
27.
27, and your youngest is 12. And so we see them here at the church, very respectful children, very pleasant children, very happy, it seems like, you know. And so that speaks a lot to not just me, because I'm not the only person that's commented on that, but to a lot of people in our church and a lot of people I know. And so the reason for this interview is because I just wanted to get with people like you guys and pick your brain a little bit. And I wanted to share it to my YouTube audience to helpfully glean some tips and some tricks and some patterns and some methods that could help somebody who watches be a better parent. So I'm glad you've joined us today. This is going to be a very casual conversation, so just sit back and relax and enjoy the conversation. I want to start out first by introducing ourselves, and you know me, I'm Hal, but we have Lawerence and Tracy. Lawerence is a military man.
I am.
Not mistaken. He 30 years in the Army.
30 years.
And you retired from the Army, and you're still doing government work, if I'm not mistaken.
I am still working as a civilian for the Army.
Okay. And Tracy, I know that you are a homeschool mom.
Yep.
You know, if I'm not covering everything, let me know, but you've homeschooled all 8 of your children?
Yes.
And you've
24 years.
24 years, okay.
That's some.
And out of your 8 children, how many have successfully graduated from high school?
We have 5 graduates. Six
Six
graduates from high school.
Okay.
And college graduates, we have 3.
Yeah, and you still have some in high school, so it's not like
Yeah.
they failed. I don't want to give the
Yeah.
wrong impression.
Yeah.
They're all
We have two
three,
in.
3 in college, 2 who've graduated college, and 2 at home.
Awesome.
So,
All right, so I'm just going to ask you some questions here. We're going to jump right into it. And just feel free to kind of speak your heart, okay? So the first question is this. Many people struggle to raise well-behaved, pleasant children, but you have. You have done that. You have raised, as far as I can tell, from my perspective, generally well-behaved.
Not perfect, but-
Not perfect, of course,
Right.
you know, and I think everybody understands that. But in general, what important factors has contributed to you having respectful and pleasant children?
well, as you said, my kids didn't get perfect parents, and but they got the right parents. They got their parents that God wanted them to have, and we haven't produced perfect kids, but we're always striving for that. And I think for us, the thing that has been very important in terms of raising happy and kids who still want to be part of the family is just maintaining solid relationships inside and outside. And so we tried to focus on relationships and not allowing division within the home and amongst ourselves. So that was pretty important. And the first relationship was obviously with God. And so Christ was kind of the center of the house. And I think between us, you know, this was the first relationship that was probably the most important. So if we modeled kind of a Christ-like relationship and ready to reconcile and be committed to each other, that would kind of be modeled by the kids or followed by the kids. What do you want to say?
One of the things I would say also, you have opportunities to choose to do other things. And I always told them, choose a relationship first. If you could go do something, I don't know what it would be, but something where you're choosing that over spending time and developing a relationship, always choose the relationship. You'll always win out that way, I believe.
So even with their friendships with their friends,
Well, that was the kind of good thing in the military. In a way, we moved a lot, and they didn't always have friends. But that to me was okay because I wanted them to I wanted them to form close relationships with themselves, and that really forced them to do that. Even to the fact of we didn't even if that we could have had separate rooms, we would have made them room together. Sometimes switching kids up with different roommates. It's all about the relationship.
Now that's really interesting. My sister is a real estate agent, and she has said that almost everybody will not buy a house unless they can have an individual room for each child.
Yeah.
So you're saying that's probably a bad idea.
I'm laughing.
That's the only time you're going to have a room to yourself. When you go to college, you're going to have to share. When you get married, you're going to have to share. Just saying.
Yeah. I mean, we had 2 sets of bunk beds in one little room with about 24 inches of space between the bunk beds that they could walk through. So it was kind of funny. That was
Somewhere.
at Maxwell Air Force Base in a little tiny space, but it was.
But they
kids
don't know
survived.
any
They
different.
enjoyed
You
it.
know, it's really interesting because what it makes me think about is the need to have conflict resolution, even as younger children.
Yes.
When you're by yourself and no one's there to bother you, you don't have to work through things.
Right.
But
right.
when they're all together in one room, there's going to be conflict.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
so part of their education for being a successful adult is to know conflict resolution, and so putting them together. I agree with you. My kids do the same thing. Before we moved here, all 4 of them, shared a room. Now, when the girls get a little older, they'll probably need their own space.
Right. Right.
But and they complain about it. But at the end of the day, I think they like it too.
Right.
So what I hear you saying is learning to develop a relationship with you and learning to develop a relationship with each other is one of the most important things for the well-being of the child. That's good. All right. I think that'll lead in to my next question. What do you consider to be your parenting style?
Well, we're at a disadvantage because there's just 2 of us, and there were 8 of them.
Hurting.
Outnumbered.
So, wow, style. It's evolved over time.
Okay.
And I don't think it should be static, quite frankly. I mean, the old adage, you can't cross the same stream twice. The kids are changing. The influences on and around inside and outside the home are changing.
Right.
And so I just think we have to have an adaptive parenting style. I mean, there's certain things that are just foundational that don't change. And so, again, back to just kind of where's the center of the home and what's our focus. And so I really think we isn't a style. Again,
Well, would you consider yourself more of a laid-back parent, or more of a
Authoritative.
involved parent, or like a parent that pushes them to make their own choices, or does that kind of evolve as they get older? Like,
I think it evolves as they get a little bit older. We're very involved. You can't homeschool and not, well, you can, but we cannot homeschool well and not be very involved. Even he's involved as the principal of the home. So we're very involved that way.
Yeah, but we, early on when the kids were younger, we wanted them to have a kind of biblical reason why we did things.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the early foundation. And then, I don't know if they always got that, but those are the kinds of things, people don't like the word, but the world's ready to indoctrinate our kids. We tried to indoctrinate them before the world got to them.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And just give them a foundational set and help them to think. I was thinking of the word apologia. To kind of give a well-reasoned argument for why we say what we say or don't say what others say, and why we do some of the things that we do or don't do some of the things that others do, and know why, and be comfortable explaining that and being okay with that. And so, but as they got older, again, it had to be kind of giving them the tools to kind of reach their own conclusions or figure it out for themselves, and so they could own their own faith, quite frankly, because I didn't want to make these robots who couldn't own it themselves.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a transition point where they've got to own their lives and their decisions. And again, back to the not perfect parents, and we're still figuring it out, but parenting preschoolers or elementary school or middle schoolers is quite different than parenting college-bound high schoolers and kids in college and kids after college. It's a different animal.
Yeah, which I'll let you go ahead in just a second, which is one of the reasons I'm really glad you're here, because I've never parented a teenager before. And so I'm gleaning information for the, and I actually had someone message me, watch one of my videos and message me, and they asked me about parenting older children. I'm like, I don't know yet.
Yeah,
I have some theories,
yeah.
but I'm not there yet. Anyway, go ahead. What were you going to share?
Well, one thing, we used to take this, we took a class, it was a Bible parenting class. I can't remember the name of it, but one of the things that Growing Kids God's Way. We moved away from it, but one of the things we took from it was our kids responding when we told them something with a yes, ma'am. And a lot of people thought we did that, yes, ma'am, or no, sir, but because of the military. But we did it because they taught that yes, ma'am means I heard you, I understand, and I will obey. So when you go back to the kids thinking, they're thinking it through before they're going to say yes, ma'am to you, because then they can't come back and say, well, I didn't hear you. Well, you said yes, ma'am. So that means 3 things. That tells us you heard us. So that's one thing. The other thing is, when we first started homeschooling, raising kids, I think we had more of a sense of we were all in control, and they were going to do exactly what we told them to do, and they were going to. And I remember looking at other homeschool parents that had older kids, and their kids might have faltered, and I thought, how could that happen? But I began to realize, they're going to be able to make choices for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not I tell them all the time, your poor choices are not a reflective of my parenting. So
That's good. No, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys take the time to really go into the whys behind things. And I think a lot of people have a bad stereotype about Christians in general.
Right.
That we just want our kids to believe without evidence, and we just want them to believe what we believe and not to ask questions. But that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
If what we have is truth, it can withstand any question, And I encourage the same thing with my kids. Ask the questions, and I might not know the answer,
Right.
but we're going to explore it,
Yeah.
and we're going to be honest if we don't know the answer, and we're going to look into it. So that's awesome. All right, next one is this: what principles guide your parenting methods?
What principles?
So I guess one of the things that the word that comes to mind first to me was integrity, and to me integrity is kind of means a lot of different things. To me, it means you're integrated, you're complete, you're whole, and so there's integrity in our communication, and that's both verbal and nonverbal, which means inside, at least within the family unit especially, there ought to be complete integrity. I mean, completeness, oneness, no question of, our yeses are yeses, our noes are noes, and there's no gray. And so I think that was kind of a key component. And again, I won't say it's never been violated.
Yeah, of course.
but it definitely is one of those. It's just not a common thing, and it's not. And everyone knows it's not really an acceptable part of our unit. And then the other piece I would say is, we're here to serve, and so everyone's got to contribute, both within our home and outside is the expectation. And so I think part of our intent for our family was really to kind of make people that could go out and impact the world. And,
that's
and
awesome.
So, it's because people used to always ask us, they make the common joke, do you know what causes all these kids? And, all that.
Yeah, I get that too. Yeah.
And or people thinking they have the liberty to question, why are you having so
All
many
the time,
kids?
Yes.
And I could have we had different types of responses to that, but most often more often than not, we kind of evolved to where, yep, God absolutely blessed us, and we're actually helping the world through this effort. We're going to make it better, and so so part of the reason, when we think about parenting our kids, they knew ahead of time that folks were going to look at them and expect the worst. And so anything they could do to turn that into a lie, or to disabuse them of the notion that these kids can't behave themselves or control themselves or be good people is a victory for God. So so anyway.
Yeah, well, people like you and I, we have two strikes against us from the world's perspective. We have a lot of kids, and we homeschool them. Right. People don't like that, and there's a lot of stereotypes that come with that. Like, because once in a while you do see homeschooled families that they're not teaching their kids, and those are the ones that get put in the front, and everybody sees them, and so there's kind of this stereotype that homeschool kids aren't educated. And I'm glad we're talking about this, because this is obviously not the case. I was just today they brought their son, who is 17.
18.
Who? Oh,
Coleman.
Coleman.
You mean it to
Coleman
school?
here.
Oh no, Preston.
Preston.
And how old is Preston?
15.
15. They brought their 15-year-old to the church, and he's in the lobby. He has an hour to kill. He's reading a book. Okay? That's how many public school kids would be doing that. Not too many, probably, right? And so this notion, and the same thing is true with my kids. My kids love to learn. I'm not saying we're the best teachers in the world, but they've kind of learned to teach themselves in a lot of ways. And I think that's a good thing that homeschoolers learn, is to teach themselves, to read for themselves. And so what I really kind of glean from this is an unselfish approach to parenting, not raising kids to make me happy, not raising kids to just make my name great throughout the earth, but to make a difference in the world.
Right.
And I think when we can adopt that kind of attitude, the blessing of God will be upon our family and upon our children, and that's what I see in your cases. So what do you want to add anything to that? What was the question? What principles undergird your parenting style?
No, I think he covered it. I was going to say something else, but I lost it. It'll come back to me. About.
Well, you kind of again, the long-term indicator, the best indicator for you of success is what, though, scripturally? The best thing you could hear about your kids.
No greater joy that they would walk in the joy of the Lord. I mean, yeah, they know that about me. I'm not interested in what, I mean, I want you to go to college and to graduate, but I want you to serve the Lord. I want you to be nation changers. I want you to make a difference. I want you to be that type of person. You walk in a room, you change the atmosphere for the better for God. That's the kind of children that I'm after, that I want to.
And so just on a practical level, what part has the scriptures and prayer played in your family?
Oh my goodness. Well, homeschooling, that's what I was going to say. First of all, I don't know about homeschooling is the thing you can't put a price on, I feel, is the closeness the kids are together. And it's only because they're together day in and day out. And it's not a bad thing. It's and it has so much good fruit from it. And also, okay, I lost track. What
About the Bible, scriptures.
The Bible, doing Bible time together every morning, sitting around the table, reading the scriptures, memorizing books of the Word,
Wow.
And we used to, well, I still do, pay for you to do a chapter picture perfect.
Oh,
You get
wow.
some money. And a
That's
lot of people
awesome.
have a different thought to that, but I remember Brandon, my kid, one of my sons, they were all playing a game in the basement. I'll never forget this. And they were playing a game. He had his Bible open, and when he needed money. So he was just memorizing the scripture, and then he would go back and say, okay, it's my turn. But it's getting in there.
It is.
It's getting in there. So doing that, I pray with a lot of women throughout the week over our children, and things like that, praying with them, going to prayer when there's an issue. So yeah.
Yeah, I could second that. Literally, my most enjoyable time with my kids is when we sit down and read the Bible together. And the reason for that, we do it differently than some other people. We just read it,
Yeah, that's what we do.
Now, I do skip over some things that maybe not be age appropriate, which I think is fine. You know, when I get to Lot and his daughters in the cave, I gotta skip over that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what it does is it fosters a lot of questions. They ask questions, I try to give answers, and then a lot of times it'll lead to just conversations, and we'll have conversations that'll go on and on,
Yep.
and it will just fuel that beautiful relationship of what families should have, where they're interacting with each other rather than somebody over here and somebody over there. And one of the beauties, I think, of homeschooling that I didn't really think about. Now, one of the reasons I homeschooled is because I didn't have a good experience in public school. I feel like it really messed me up, and Jesus had to help me. I'm still messed up, but I'm getting better as we go. But one of the benefits is my children really know how to interact with people of all different grade levels and all different ages.
Yes.
And a lot of times people are amazed at how well my children interact with adults,
Right.
for
Right.
example, because normally kids are just stuck in there with their own peers,
Right.
and they're not ever interacting with people of different ages. And so I think that's also another benefit of homeschooling. And maybe I should do a video on homeschooling one day, because I do think there's a lot of benefits to it. And I've seen, you know, the fruitfulness in our families and in other families that homeschool. And I know the horrors sometimes of public schools. So not that homeschooling is for everyone, but I think more people should give it a shot.
Yeah.
You know, our Christian people especially.
Yeah.
You know,
I've enjoyed it, and I'm thankful that I've been able to do it and continue to do it.
and you get to spend time with your kids,
Yep.
and you get to be the one that influences them. So there's just a lot of pluses to that.
I just want to throw one other
Sure.
thing that kind of principle is to just do hard things and plan on doing work.
Okay.
I mean, be ready to work, volunteer to work. And so I think it sounds really basic, but I have observed that that's not always consistently demonstrated by kids. So we would make
Especially
the kids do
not
that.
in this day and
and
age.
age.
Yeah.
Right.
So
You know,
they
really
know.
in a lazy kind of
Yeah, and
society. when
yeah,
it
and
comes to our
again,
children.
we've probably been guilty to some extent of doing more for them than
Right.
we should,
Right.
and so every time now and again I'm reminded that there's some benefit of doing without or having to work for rather than to be given something.
Yep.
And so. Anyway, so that's what the kids, we try to make them to have that as well as part of their character building.
Yeah, and that's important because, you know, you're a military man, and 3 of your kids went to West Point
The fourth one just left yesterday.
to go to West Point.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
4 of their kids, and West Point, I imagine, is not an easy
No.
college to get through. I mean, you have the
It's not even easy to get in.
not easy to get in. You get the disciplines of the Army that you won't find at other colleges, and then academic disciplines. And so you have to work hard to be able to not everybody that makes it into West Point stays in there, I'm sure, you know.
Right. Right.
But you've had how many that have graduated?
2
Two.
graduated.
1 there
One.
now and 1 going there, so 4 total.
Yeah, one
That's-
will graduate next year, and then Coleman just left. So, and he graduated from there. So,
So 5 in the family. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. And this one we kind of answered already, but I'm going to say it again. It's just a different way to say it. But what have you done as parents that you feel has helped your children to be successful? Now, you already mentioned you really kind of instilled into them like a work ethic. But, and why I say this is because you have some children who have successfully graduated from college. And for a lot of people, that's like at least a great step in the right direction of success. Just going to a good college, getting a degree, and graduating. So, what kind of values? What would you think are some of the top values that you instilled in them to help them to, when they do get out from underneath your care? Because some people think, well, homeschooled, you know, under the wings of mother hen for their whole life. You know, the one thing people say, well, homeschool kids, when they get into the real world, they're not going to be successful. But here you contradict that because you do have kids that are going out there and being successful and aren't running home to mommy, you know?
well, I think first of it, you look at the parents. I mean, we're very. I mean, their kids imitate their mom and dad, right? A lot of times. And so he's successful. He has a high standard. I think we both have high standards when we plan out their curriculum. It's on the higher end of academia. And that's just a given. And it's not, well, I can't do it or whatever. It's just, yes, you're going to do it. It might take you long, it might take more time, but you can do this. So that's one.
I was, the way you phrased the question, I really thought more about once they reach adulthood and kind of how we're parenting differently. Because I honestly, by the time they're 17, 18, and I remind them regularly, I said, you're making decisions now that I can't always control the consequences or even mitigate them. And so you're going to own those things. And so, and for the kids who are kind of out of the nest completely, they make decisions that I absolutely don't agree with. so I have to, and I have found opening my mouth is probably not always the best course of action. And so Tracy will tell
I always
you,
tell
she'll be
them,
first
pray.
line.
I mean, in those kind of instances, I honestly believe what the word says. Our weapon is in our prayer. It's not against the child standing in front of us. The spirit of rebellion, we got that. We know how to take that out. But it's not the child. It's just that's the distraction.
Yeah.
And so we have to keep, and as I was just telling him, he's a military man. He's been strategically, knows how to take his enemy out. Now he just has to
Shifted to the spiritual realm.
Exactly.
Right. So that's
Exactly.
the part where, again, Adam and Eve had the best parent in the world
Exactly.
ever, and they still went off course at times. And so I shouldn't be so prideful and arrogant to think that I'm going to parent better than God. So.
I do tell my kids
But-
I cannot pray you out of stupid.
Right.
I do tell them that.
But I do. I guess as they get older, I want to make sure that they take more ownership of their decisions and the consequences. And sometimes, just like when they were little, every now and then they got a scrape or a burn. I don't know. This may sound like child abuse, but sometimes you can predict and tell them if you do that, you're going to hurt yourself. And they go ahead and do it and hurt themselves.
Exactly.
And I knew it wasn't going to be a mortal wound. It was just going to be an educational
Yeah.
type, blow. And so I think that continues even on into adulthood for them.
Yep.
So,
And the truth is, they're their own person.
yeah.
And then I think that's something that some parents need to realize is they're your children forever.
Right.
But at the same time, they're their own person and they make their own decisions. And as a parent, our job is to help them to make the best decisions, but we don't control
Right.
what they do ultimately.
Right.
Even the best parents. I mean, you have biblical examples of people like Samuel, who had some wicked children. But of course, we believe that God can turn every situation around.
Right.
you know.
And that's the other part. We at least know
Amen.
that
Yep.
we planted seeds a long time ago.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so some of them are going to germinate maybe a little later.
Yep.
And increase 100-fold. So.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a good segue into our next session here. So, when it comes to discipline, what kind of discipline methods have you used, and what role has corporal punishment played in your parenting?
So, again, younger kids probably more corporal punishment. And again, depending on what state you're in, it might have been legal or illegal. But
I think it's legal in every state. It's not.
Well,
it's
well,
frowned
not-
upon in some states.
not in Delaware, trust me. But anyway,
Oh,
but I mean, seriously, every now and again, I mean, I have in my family line, my grandfather had this old adage. He said, "A hard head makes a soft behind," and what that meant was if you are hard-headed and you don't listen to instruction, you're going to end up having your behind softened. And so it's probably not entirely unbiblical, but but it was definitely taught to me, and I did as the kids were younger, probably up until I'd say the age of reason. What is that? I mean, it depends on the kid, and for some of my kids it was 8 years old. For others it was 15. It just it just depended on the child and their desire to test, quite frankly.
Right. Well, I know Lawrence was gone a lot. So I remember, I was by myself in Germany, and I had 6 kids, 9 and under, for 15 months. So up until that point that when we said something, I had an expectation that it was going to be done right away. Like I would tell you something, then I would go to the next child. I had no doubt in my mind that this child over here was doing exactly what I had already said. We're outnumbered. I need you to listen. So we did take a lot of time, and I never count it. If they can do it on one, if they can do it on 3, they can do it on 1. So parents that count, no offense, but they have to be able, because sometimes I need you don't know if I'm telling you to do something that could save your life, and you have to be obedient right then and there. So first time obedience, quick obedience is really, we would spend time when they were young to make sure they understood that. And then the fruits paid off later, because then, a lot of kids don't like to sit still. We would teach them, we go up near the front of church, make sure they could all sit quietly in the pew, and take them out when they needed to. Go to a restaurant, a kid's acting up, we don't mind, we'll get up and leave the bill and just deal with it, just so they know we are serious and we believe we were going to have first time obedience right away. There were many times where he had a lot of military ceremonies that he was in, and he was the commander, so we're the family up front. And people would always think, are your kids going to be okay? Can they sit there? And I'm like, oh, they'll be just fine. And they would. They would sit 6, 7 kids just sitting just quietly for an hour and a half. And that's training. Yeah. So I would do the training. I recommend the training, and then it's hard at first, but then later it's refreshing.
Yeah.
Well, the reason we went to the front all the time was because when we only had, I think, 2 kids, we were in the back of the church. And one of our kids, who was 2 at the time, I think, Hunter, chucked a sippy cup from the back pew all the way to the front. And so we decided that day that we were no longer going to sit in the back, we were going to sit in the front. And so 6 more kids later, we were all still in the front. Yeah. And they knew that they'd be on display.
Yeah, everyone could see them.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, now the other thing that came to mind also was just early on, again, them understanding, why the conduct wasn't acceptable, and then having to make amends or restitution, and so that kind of concept had to come in, and it was, keeping the principles, just keeping the short accounts, apologizing, paying back. Kind of just, again, teaching, true repentance type of piece. And so sometimes you didn't have to use a glue stick to make them feel bad and have true remorse. And then after a while, nowadays, as they got older, the challenge of, when you take away a privilege or an item, we were never big timeout fans. I don't think it was just so. Anyway,
pull it together.
Yeah.
So, was it difficult? You were home alone a lot, and you had to do the spanking. Was that difficult for you as a woman? No.
No. When he was not at all. When he was leaving to go to Iraq, and Hunter, my son Hunter, the oldest, is like 6, 7 and a half, 6, 8. And I remember looking at him, telling him, your height means nothing to me. I will take you out if I need to. I'm not afraid of you. I don't feel like I have to call him back home. We're going to handle it right here and there. Because you get 16 or 17 and you just feel like you can just on mom. And I was like, no.
That's not going to happen.
No. And I was just, and I might have been shaking in my boots saying it, but I just knew that he needed to know that I was going to handle him if I needed to. Because he had to go away.
And that's a unique situation because not everybody's in that not everybody's in that situation, but there are a lot of single moms.
Yep.
And they need to know that they can stand up to their children.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of them crumble before their children.
Yep.
And they need to exercise, especially if they're a single mom, that toughness, because
Right.
they're the only one there. You know,
Right.
and I think there are some women that do that, and I'm happy. And the ones that struggle, you know, we encourage them to, you know, you may not feel it on the inside,
Right.
but display it and be it, because they need that authoritative figure, you know.
Yeah, the only other thing that came to mind is it's less about the discipline piece, but just more on the whole philosophy thing. I want the kids to always know that this was kind of the first relationship. This was the most important relationship.
Between you two?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And this is the one that's going to continue even after that when they leave.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and if this always was intact, they could. The benefits to them was a sense of security.
Yeah.
You know, just an anchor point.
Yeah.
This is a constant. You know, now barring one of us leaving this earth sooner than we expect, but that's the point. And for me, I did in my childhood wonder whether my parents were going to be together. You know, there was that kind of dynamic inside the household, and I didn't really want my kids to ever go to bed at night and have to ponder, the stability of this relationship.
Right.
And so,
And that's I think people don't recognize how important that is, and what a role that plays in the child's psyche. You know, to know that their parents are going to be there. I mean, it's just I don't. You know, my parents were divorced, but they were there for me. You know, and so for a child to think they're not there for me,
Right.
that can certainly lead to difficult behavior.
right.
That's rooted in more than just a child being bad for the sake of being bad.
You have a lot of military families that the husband has to leave, but then a lot of times they get stationed somewhere and they don't want to go yet because it's not good for the child. They'll want to stay at that school. And we always said that we homeschool, so, but we would remain together. We wouldn't choose to him go ahead of me and me stay behind. There are too many times where he's got to go that we can't help. But just knowing that we're most important, the unit, the kids will be fine. You know what I mean? Some people are
exactly.
like, oh, they're in sports, they got to do that. No, they're going to be fine because he and I, you have to be, we just believe in being together.
Yeah, as much as you possibly can.
Right.
And of course, there are circumstances, obviously, where you
Right.
weren't able to be together, but as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads into my next question. And I kind of had the same experience where I spanked all my kids when they were younger, especially for the girls as they got older. It just didn't seem like it was helpful. Of course, my boys are still very young. But when it came to your kids getting older, did you continue to use spankings sporadically, or did you mostly transition into a different kind of punishment?
Consequences were good. Sometimes when you're strict homeschool, kind of strict, they don't have a lot of freedom. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what do you take away from them? If they don't watch TV all the time, if they don't have these games, then what do you take away? But I think we did more consequent. We tried to get more creative than
Yeah.
Like what would be an example?
the shirts.
Well, yeah. So okay. Here's a couple of not necessarily approved methods, but when there was conflict between kids, or even a physical issue between two, and they couldn't resolve it themselves, I would get a big T-shirt and I'd make them both wear it, the inside of
Together.
it. So,
So they had to learn to get along.
Oh, they
and
did not like
they
that.
Hated,
Oh,
they
that
hated
was-
that hug it out shirt.
I'm gonna remember that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that popped in my head in terms of one of my kids who I was coaching basketball, and I think that child was 8 or 9, did something that was demonstrated really disobedience and disrespect, and the consequence actually, and selfishness. It was really one of those just really out of the bounds events, and so the consequence was remained on the team but did not play, and for the remainder of the season.
Oh wow.
And I didn't have to. It didn't require, a lot of change in my tone of voice. And I didn't require any physical thing. It was just, well, you're going to be at every practice. You'll sit there. You'll watch. you will see me coach other kids, and you will see, kind of how they respond to that. And so it was a very.
This was your son, or
This was my son.
okay?
He was the coach's kid, and he ended up being the coach's kid on the bench
Wow.
for the remainder of the season. So.
Sometimes you got to do the hard stuff.
And so, but again, it was. I at the time I thought that, this wasn't one of those things that need to be. A spanking wasn't the answer.
Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't.
I agree with you. I don't think a spanking is always the answer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
When they're younger, it's a little spanking. It helps them to go in the right direction,
Yeah.
and there may be instances when they're older when it's called for. But I think with the corporal punishment, like my theory is when you use it when you need to when they're younger, before
Right.
they really develop this age of reason where they can understand these
Right.
consequences, and plus they've developed this pattern of obedience
Right.
over the younger years
Right.
through that kind of discipline, to where it's not as difficult to discipline them in other ways as they're a little bit older.
Right.
And then the other thing I could have probably done better, but it's very important also, is just to reassure them that they're loved,
Yeah.
no matter
The
how,
encouragement
whether it's
after it.
yeah, and know that my love for them isn't based on their performance, and so.
And that never ends.
Yeah.
Like you have to always, like even now when our kids make decisions, the older ones that we don't agree with, to be, you're upset with the decision, but to let them know you still love them. That's really important, and it's harder
Yeah, especially because you don't want to necessarily validate or
what they're doing.
Yeah.
say I endorse your behavior.
Right.
No, I don't endorse it. But,
I love you, but you're being dumb.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think that's extremely important. Okay, just a couple more things. We're kind of moving away from you as a family and kind of looking at society as a whole, and I just want to hear your opinions. What would you say is the most pressing issues that need to be addressed regarding raising children in our society today? Like, what do you see as the issues that need to be addressed, and maybe the solutions that could help?
Well, keep the fathers in the home.
Okay.
Parents should never give up the privilege and the responsibility to parent their kids. You can't transfer that responsibility. You should not transfer that responsibility. And I think society is telling us it's okay. They're conditioning us to give up more and more of our parental responsibilities, and I think that's a bad path that we're getting on.
Like, there is a trend, I don't know how popular it is, where parents want to be more friends with their kids.
No.
I've met parents who want their kids to call their parents by their first names. That kind of
I mean,
stuff.
there's a time that you can be friends with your kids. I think it's when they're a little bit older and they have their own children and things like that.
Yeah.
But right now, no, that doesn't really work well. You're the authoritative person.
And I think, you can still be their friend. You should be their friend.
Right.
But it's more than that. Like, if you're a boss or if you're a military commander, your subordinate can be your friend in a sense, but it's still your subordinate when push comes to shove. And so I do think that is an important issue. That is, a lot of people are handing their kids off to the public school or handing their kids off to the daycare, and we really become a society, and I see it in the church even, where people just really feel the need to work two jobs, or both parents feel the need to work, when it's not really in all cases necessary. You get a smaller house. Don't need fancy cars, and one of the parents can stay home and be with the children more.
When we were dating, he kind of wanted. He made it clear that he wanted a wife that was going to be home raising the kids, and I remember being really upset about that. Telling my mom,
Say it
but
that way.
not that way. But that when we had children, that we didn't want to pawn them. We
Yeah.
wanted to raise them, and so I understood what he was saying, and so that that was before we got married, so there were no surprises once we got married.
That's the way to do it,
Yes.
folks.
And
Talk
then
about those things ahead of time.
Then we had children, and I just want to say that, I mean, there's not a lot of positive things behind moms that are staying home. And I am a mom that has stayed home for 27 years, and absolutely no regrets. I mean, sometimes I'm like, well, could I do this or could I do that? But in my heart, I know I've done the right thing. In my heart, I know I've done an awesome, phenomenal thing. And there's no one else that could have done it besides me for my family.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
And so it's we get one chance to do this well, and I'm just not giving that over to anybody else.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because there is an enormous amount of pressure to feel like you are not being a powerful woman
Right.
by staying home.
Yeah.
Like you're giving in or you're giving up. Like you're giving in to pressure from somebody else. But here you are on the other end of things, and I know your husband isn't twisting your arm to say
No,
this.
I was going to say he's very supportive. So it's nice to have a husband that is
Yeah.
incredibly supportive of, there have been times I've had trouble with my kids, and he's like, you will not disrespect your mother. He has come home from work a couple times to straighten out
Yeah.
kids in the middle of a busy day to say, you are going to respect your mother.
That's
And
good.
and so that puts me where, in the place that I should be in front of my kids, like, hey, you're gonna have to deal with dad if you disrespect me. So that helps.
And you said you don't have any regrets that you stayed home.
No, not at all.
But I have met people who gave up their children for their career, basically. Let somebody else raise their kids or not have kids at all.
Yeah.
Who now they're past the age of childbearing, or they haven't had kids, or their kids are in a mess and they regret that they pursued a bigger paycheck or a bigger house or social status or whatever it is, and but there's so much fulfillment
Right.
in being a mom, and that's an awesome thing.
I mean, and again, everybody's circumstance is different, and so I won't be a harsh judge of what people do, but it would be good to think long term, strategically. Folks used to always tell us, you can't afford all these kids. How are you going to afford all that? And the funny thing, and I would watch what others were doing, and it's kind of funny. Our kids don't remember getting clothes from consignment shops, but they did. Or even, I mean, we have she has a brother who's a doctor, and his kids got all the finest clothes and never wore them. And I wasn't too prideful to accept these things from them, And but the other things that we did, I think it's important, regardless of where you are financially, is there's little things you can do to create memories and make events important. So she's the holiday birthday person
Yeah,
who makes
I'm
all
real
those
big in
dates
that.
special.
Yep.
But in our house, I mean, one of our little traditions was just making a big box cake for birthdays, and everyone getting involved in decorating it for the person. And those things didn't cost a lot, but everyone knew it was going to happen.
Everyone
and we were always
remembers
doing it and involved in it. And
That's cool.
and so, or whether it was games or cheap camping trips or those kinds of things, we just did. And it wasn't the 1 week stay at Disney World, but there were memories nonetheless that they remember and they still talk about today. And I get kids who are in their 20s and say, "Oh, I can't wait to come home," or they're amongst themselves, they're talking about, "Do you remember that time when we did this, and this?" And I'm like,
That's really
that was
priceless.
the most frugal vacation, and you guys are still
Yeah,
talking
and
about
see,
wanting
and
to do
it goes back to the whole relationship aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Because the true joy in life is not the things that you do; it's the people that you do stuff with.
Right. Right.
And I see that with my kids. As a parent, this. There's no greater joy than when your children are just enjoying each other. Having a good time with each other. And I know plenty of children who go to Disney World every year. And a lot of them like, I wish I had a brother. I wish I had a sister.
Yeah, who to play with. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people, and of course my kids are the same way. I wish we could go to Disney World, but and we try to do as much fun
As much
things
as we can.
we
do.
can.
Yeah.
But there is that aspect of just being with each other and enjoying each other that I think is so much even more valuable than
Yeah.
something money can buy.
That's right.
You know.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
all right, one more question. What advice would you give to a parent that is struggling right now to raise disciplined and happy children? I know that we talked a lot about it, but if we can try to narrow it down and say what, if there's somebody watching right now, they're like, maybe they're new parents starting out, or maybe they have a child that's difficult. Do you have any nuggets that you kind of throw out and say, well, this is...
Well, I definitely think it's so important to spend time with the child. And even if you're having a hard time with that child just tells me they need even more time with you than they realize, because they are struggling. And so just stopping and slowing down and spending time, simple moments with your child on a more regular basis, and they begin to look forward to it, they begin to expect it, they begin to want it. I think that whole society, just slow down, put the phone away, parents and kids, and have a dinner time where no one can get on the phone, no one's talking, we're just loving and enjoying one another. I think that's a really important thing to do.
I like that. That's good.
And the other thing, I just wanted to circle back. I don't like to, with that one thing, it just came to me when we were talking about when you start out at the beginning of your marriage, and we were talking about how we were going to do the kids. One of the things that we talked about it, but then we did things that assured that was going to happen. Meaning, I'm a college graduate, so I did have a career, a small career for a time being. But even though he never lived off my paycheck, we never ever, we always lived off his salary, so mine was just extra. So then when the kids came, we were able to go into just
into it. So having the plan ahead of time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And did you plan to have 8 children? Or was that like, hey, I want to have 8 kids, or was it I want to have a lot of kids, or?
Well, we couldn't have kids at first. We were told.
Oh,
right. So we were actually. Not expecting to have any.
Wow.
It was definitely a point of friction in our marriage for a while, and then we came to a point where I just kind of had given it to God and said,
"We'll adopt.
We'll see what happens, whatever." And then unexpectedly. But I think it was just, again, part of our testimony. We weren't ready to be parents, I don't think. And I think God used it to get us right with Him first. And then when He saw that, I think He said, okay, I'm going to open things up for them.
All right.
And so the first child came, and I was shocked. When Hunter was born, I was in the parking lot on my face, and then Lauren came 15 months later, and we were like, wow, 2. That's 2 years. And then we were, by the time we got 2 more years, we started doing natural family planning. Sure enough, another one came.
And then I said, that's enough. It's a lot. For me, they're all close together. We're done. And so I said, you're getting a vasectomy. So he did, and then as soon as he didn't want to, and then as soon as he did, I felt convicted that we did the wrong thing. So I began to pray, but he said, listen, if God wants us to have more, He's going to have it through this vasectomy. And I began to pray for a reversal. And so then a couple months later, he walks into a hospital, sees an old classmate of his from West Point that's a doctor there, and he asked him, do you guys do?
No. We were just. There were 2 of my classmates. Both were doctors, and we were chatting. And actually, before one of them was an OB who had delivered one of the kids. He asked me how things were going. I told him what happened with this vasectomy thing several months ago, and I said, "Can you believe Tracy wants me to get this thing reversed?" I said, "There's absolutely no way." Somebody, and fortunately at the hospital we were at in the military, they didn't have a urologist who did the procedure because it was fairly pretty new or in the military, and he says, "Don't you know so and so just arrived?" And I said, "You're kidding? I haven't seen him since graduation." He goes, "Oh yeah, and he's a urologist and he specializes in it." I said, "You're kidding me?" And then the next second, he walks around the corner and he sees me. He joins and he says, "Hey, we were just talking about you." He goes, "Okay, come see me
Next week.
next week."
No way.
And so, like 10 days later, I'm on the table.
Wow.
So 4 kids before and 4 after.
And so we just decided at that point, this was whatever God gave us is what we were going to take. And so we didn't do anything from that
Well,
point
think
forward.
about think about what consequence that decision had on not just your life, but your children's life and their children. It's just like it's too mind-boggling to think
Yeah.
about, you know.
More
But
kids,
I
yeah.
mean,
And
and
I
I
do-
imagine there's such a joy that you can't imagine life without them.
They are. I mean, I just want to share one thing. When I was struggling with us to begin to trust the Lord, I said, "What about education? What about paying for college? What about all those things?" And it's like I heard God say, "You give me your womb, and I'll take care of all of that." And so that's the story that I don't think that people understand. They look at, "Oh, you've got these kids going to West Point." To me, it's God's provision. I'm not paying a dime.
Yeah.
And every time, and he's creative. I mean, one daughter did go to college and we paid, another one's going, we're paying, but the point is they're all getting an education and I don't have to worry about how we're going to afford it.
Yeah.
And that's what he promised me.
Yeah.
So,
And it's like you had to trust God
yes, yeah,
because you didn't know for sure back then
Yeah.
what was going to happen, you know.
right. You
But-
didn't know if you'd be pregnant at 49.
and that's what a lot of people. And I'm not saying to make dumb decisions, but the biggest thing you hear is, "Oh, I'm not having any more kids because I have one. And this one's too expensive. You know, what am I going to do?" But you're never going to have enough money.
Right,
you know,
right. Well, there's always something else.
there's always something else.
Always something.
And you know what? In our life, God's provided so much. In the same way, like we rarely have to purchase clothes because people in the church are like, you know, my son wore all these clothes and we're just going to donate them anyway.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
take them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're brand new or they look
Right,
really nice.
right.
And so God provides.
Yeah, he does.
And I think, God really likes family and he really likes people. And I really think he smiles upon families that enjoy each other and enjoy that company. So I think it's a beautiful thing. Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for
You're
welcome.
You're welcome.
joining us, and I hope you watching really gleaned something out of this video. If you did watch it, you obviously would have gleaned something. There's a lot of good stuff said here. So thank you so much for joining. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also hit the little bell so you can be notified of future videos that come out. But thank you so much for watching, and we pray that you have a great day.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. Well, that was fun.
Gosh,
Yeah.
man, you do this all the time?
No, you're my first. I make videos. Like I've never thought of doing an interview until
Wow.
now,
Wow.
and so I was like, you know what? I'd love to just.